Thank you. You are so welcome.
I'm so pleased Neltje has worked us into her crazy book tour schedule that has spanned from Texas to Montana. And I just wanted to say that the reading this afternoon is co-sponsored by the Art Museum and the MFA program in creative writing, and I wanted to thank Allison Hagee and Jeff Lockwood for helping us coordinate this, and also to acknowledge Second Story Books for being here to make sure that you have books to purchase and get signed, which we will do after the reading. Neltje is no stranger to the University of Wyoming. The Art Museum has featured several of her exhibitions over the years, including her major survey called Neltje Painting 1990 to 2012, which was in, I believe, 2014. In 2010, she made the largest estate gift to UW in its history, one that will, in the future, transform the role of the arts through the Neltje Center for Visual and Literary Arts in Banner, Wyoming. And this year, she donated one monumental painting to the Buchanan Center for the Performing Arts, which we dedicated last spring. So we thank Neltje for all of her contributions and support of the Art Museum and the University of Wyoming. Today, however, we learn about Neltje's life through her memoir, North of Crazy. To say a few words about the book and introduce Neltje, please welcome Allison Hagee, Professor, MFA Creative Writing Program.
Good evening, everybody. It's a real honor to be able to introduce Neltje tonight. My first contact with Neltje was through her work. I saw a painting in Buffalo, Wyoming, and I said, wow. It was a very ferocious piece. And I said, whoever made that is a really interesting person. My second encounter was at the Yellowstone Art Museum up in Billings when I came upon some of these just incredibly beautiful lyrical paintings. And I noticed they were by the same artist, and I thought, okay, ferocious, but also what a spirit, how lyrical, and what an incredible sense of color. And then when the Moroccan suite was exhibited here on these walls in this museum, I just was bowled over. I just felt like every brushstroke, which was very physical for her, each one was also very physical for me as a viewer. And that exhibition and those paintings remain just imprinted on my mind, and the kind of thing that just makes me recognize how powerful and how healing and how transformative art can be. And today is a day for transformative art. Neltje's memoir is really quite remarkable, and it is about passion. It is about emerging, and those of you who are young and emerging artists, whether in the visual or literary arts, I really want you to listen to her story and think about what it took for her to take what she loved and to break the bonds of many bonds of culture, of family, in order to get to where she wanted to be, to make what was important to her. How hard it is and what it takes, and also then how remarkable that transformation can be for a town, for a community, for a university, and for millions and millions of viewers. The book is incredible, it's painful, but it's also very powerful, very honest, and I think rigorous in all the ways that those of us who make art find rigorous. So I bring to you Neltje because, again, this is an evening we need to hear from a very strong woman. So thank you. Welcome, Neltje.
Thank you. How wonderful to look out and see so many friends. And whether I know you or not, doesn't really matter. You're here to listen to my story, and that makes you a friend. I will start with the prologue. It took me 3.5 years to write this story, and it took me 1.5 years to get the publisher to get it out. So it's a matter of 5 years. Now, when your people ask me which do you like, writing or being a painter? Being a painter, I have almost instant gratification. I like that. Who doesn't? But here we are. Prologue. My cabin here at the base of the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming fronts on the rising sun, yet allows me to watch light fail behind the granite peaks each evening from my living room chair. What an apt metaphor for my life, as I was born in New York City, and when I die, my ashes will be spread on this ground. I sit on the cabin's deck, as I have weekend mornings for the past 22 years, drink coffee out of the same cup, and let my mind roam free as the herds of buffalo used to do and the elk still do. I shade my eyes and look east to Pumpkin Buttes, 85 miles away. The breadth of this land stuns me still. After 48 years in Wyoming, and the ever-changing subtle to brilliant light soothes and provokes my mind. How lucky I am to be where I am and to be who I am. The little North Fork of Crazy Woman Creek, aptly named for my life, tumbles out of the mountain, passes through this land of mine, meanders across the plains, marries into the Powder River, the Yellowstone, the Missouri, and finally the Mississippi. I think on the pioneers, the guts it took to travel this tough country in the 1800s, and I remember the courage it took me to leave the East, the comfort of the familiar, to make a life out of the scraps of myself. I set out for the waterfalls with my dogs, my constant companions. Gypsy, a basset hound, and Tara, an almost blind Australian shepherd mix. This afternoon is perfect for a walk. On one side of the little North Fork of Crazy Woman Creek, huge granite teeth pierce the sky. There the uplift of Sisters Hill, and on the other side of the creek lie the forested flatirons of Red Dog. I think of these foothills as guardians of the wilderness beyond. Cliffs, pools, boulders, rocks, trees, pine cones, and the singing cascades. Dry grasses crackle beneath my feet. It is late August, 2013. We have had a drought for 10 years. The dogs lead me down a cow path to the creek where water burbles, glazing the rocks. I bend and crouch to avoid the clawing limbs of dead trees and poking shrubs that nip at my legs. Down through a young aspen grove, up over huge ragged rocks, along the narrowest path where I must put one foot right in front of the other or fall into the creek far below. The dogs turn to make sure I follow. I continue on and say, go, go. I stop to sit by a pool, watch the dogs snuffle tree trunks and grasses. They swim like toddlers in the mountain stream and then shake their bodies, spraying me with water. Farther up, I gaze up the vast canyon walls, a creamy rose in the softened light. They are well over 100 feet high and many hundreds of feet in width. I must throw my head back as far as it will go to take in the plummeting drop of these cliffs. I cross the creek on a rickety wood bridge, hike straight up the hill with the help of a blue nylon rope attached to a ponderosa pine above. I come to an area of ill-assorted rock, of different shapes and thicknesses, some of odd tilts, the perfect spot to twist, sprain, or break an ankle. No one would find me for days. No one knows where my weekend wanderings take me. It is a terrain I fear. After scrabbling up on hands and knees over more rocks and boulders, I find a faint path in a pine needle forest. 2 years ago, I saw a mountain lion at the mouth of the cave on the other side of the creek. It was very early spring. He seemed to be napping in the sunshine. The creek still had a coat of ice. Each step I took was a challenge. But no flies buzzed about the lion. But he was absolutely still. I hugged him, stroked his curled body, scratched his ear. He was dead. I wondered why. I hear the roar of falling waters reverberate in this tight valley, and a short distance away, half hidden by cottonwood and ponderosa pine trees, I see the waterfall. Hollowed out cups of granite give me footholds on the final boulder. I reach the pool's edge, stand tall before the pounding water, the spray, and watch droplets dancing in the sunlight. I take off my boots and socks, shirt, jeans, and underclothes. The stone is rough on my bare feet. I take a step down to the granite ledge just beneath the water. In one motion, I turn, face the falls, and dive flat into the water, and oh my God, is it cold! I swim a few strokes towards the falls. Think of the power and cold, turn back and swim 7 strokes to the granite ledge. I have to kneel before I can stand. I let out a howl. I'm damn glad to be alive. I'm 78 years old and not proud of every moment. In order to give you an idea of my attachment to nature, which started very early, I give you a little reading of plantation life. My family had a plantation in South Carolina where my father did his business all in the wintertime. And that was my playground. And we also mostly lived up on Long Island in New York State, in a big brick house that was formal, and I was very uncomfortable there. But when I was up there, I climbed trees, and I hid out in the woods. But I will read you just a little bit about plantation living. It is the first chapter. Today, we are going fishing. I'm excited because I like being in the flat-bottom boat with Jimmy, paddling, gliding along beside tall rice grasses. They line each side of the narrow canals, wave and rustle, making a comforting sound in the still air. Jimmy's my friend. He says he takes fishing as a treat for both of us. I trail my fingers in the soft, warm water as I wonder how Jimmy knows where to find the best fishing spots. One canal looks like another to me. I am 6 years old. It is Christmas vacation, 1940, and I'm so happy to be at Bonnie Hall, our plantation in Yemassee, South Carolina. I wear my deep blue corduroy jacket and pants. This is my favorite set of clothes and will keep me warm on the water. Mademoiselle Van Toche, my new French governess, will be coming too. This past summer, Nana, the Scottish nurse I've had since I was born, left us to work for the Roosevelts. My brother Nelson and I cried. I am too old for a baby nurse, according to my mother. And besides, she says, I need to learn to speak French. This is Mademoiselle's first year at Bonnie Hall. I feel superior because I have been fishing with Jimmy and Nana many times. Nelson, who is a little more than a year older than I, almost never comes fishing. He prefers to play with his go-kart and trains, and he never rides horseback either. Sometimes I miss his being near me, but I like having Jimmy all to myself. We meet down at the landing beyond the 3 pecan trees. Am I right in that? In Texas, I had to say pecan. Okay, the 3 pecan trees, older, well, that doesn't make any sense. I like the sound of pecan shells cracking against each other in my hands. Each shell holds 2 nuts, like 2 people in a pod. I talk to them when no one is around. We climb into the flat-bottom boat, which is painted a deep green. Jimmy sits down on the back bench, takes up a paddle and strokes evenly through the water, maybe letting a drip fall into the boat as he switches the paddle from one side to the other. This each side paddling keeps the boat steady and straight in the canal, Jimmy tells me. He will choose the middle. He will choose the lure. The lures are made of 2 brightly painted pieces of wood, hinged in the middle, so that each part wriggles like a fish or some kind of bug. 4 hooks dangle off the metal rods in each section of the lure. All lures have names: scrubber, pirate, she-devil. Jimmy says it matters which one he chooses. It all depends on the time of day, where we are, and where the sun is. I am glad Jimmy knows so much about fishing and hunting, and about alligators and snakes, which are poisonous, which harmless. I feel safe being with him. I am part of this rice field now. I inhale its musty, damp smells, sometimes sour and other times pure, almost sweet. I like peeking between the grasses. Occasionally we round a bend to find a flurry and flap of ducks squawking as they lift off, annoyed at having their peace disturbed. Jimmy paddles. We glide almost noiselessly. For the moment, I bask in the world of water, sharp-edged rice stalks, slime, and dreams. No, you have to, or you are wrong, or when will you ever learn to look where you're going? Have you scraped your knee again? Jimmy and I let out our line, not too far, to keep the hooks from getting snagged. You have to wriggle or jerk the fishing pole softly to make the lure at the end of the line seem alive to the fish. Mademoiselle swats at flies, asks, "When will we go back?" "Not for a long time. We only just got here," I replied. At that instant, a line zings as it slices through the water. Jimmy stands and cries out, "We've got one on the line!" The boat rocks. He reels in the line steadily, not too fast. The fish darts from one side to the other, to the front of the boat, to the back of the boat, making the line sing out. Sometimes the fish breaks through the water to get away, twirling its body in a spiral that shines bright in the green, blue, brown water as Jimmy reels the fish alongside. When he lifts the tip of his rod, the fish flies, wriggles, squirms, flips, lands with a slap in the bottom of the boat. One eye stares up at the sky. The painted orange and green lure with one hook lost in the fish's mouth rests like a broken toy on the boat's bottom. Jimmy whacks the fish on the head with a stone. I catch 2 baths, and Jimmy gets 2 more. What a good day. I want to go to a time that is, maybe I'm 10, to give you a kind of idea of how I was brought up. The house, as I said, in Long Island was very formal. My family entertained a great deal, a number of well-known people. Somerset Maugham lived on the plantation with us. Daphne du Maurier came over and stayed with us. And there were actors and writers and producers and directors. And I was given a very clear line of what my life would be, or should be. Over time, years, really, my mother subtly told me what was expected of a woman, what a man wanted when he married. Learn to be the power behind the throne. Help boost men's egos and never confront them directly with your desires. Be clever. Take no credit for an idea. Let it always come from him, even if the suggestion was yours. Marrying for love is not always necessary for a happy life. Mind and ambition are more important than the body. It is a woman's job to be the source of interest in a conversation. Bring up ideas about books you have read or something in the newspaper. I suppose sports if you have to. And, darling, use your charms. With authors, ask them about what they are in the midst of. It's a good phrase that covers lots of territory without being specific, or tell them what you enjoyed in their book. Always read the book before meeting the author. Use your charms on everyone. Women too, for they are the competition. Think of something of interest that will capture the attention of a dinner partner, and at any party, rescue a man standing off alone by himself. He is usually fearfully shy. Sometimes you do get a grouch who wants to be left alone, but rarely. And be kind to lonely-looking women as well. You never know when it might be you. These were lessons my mother told me from the time I was 10, and they expanded in their intensity after my father died. I was 14 when he died. I remembered being 8 years old, standing out by the swing set. I had just been told to go to my room for insulting my mother. I said to myself, I will give up who I am, what I want, and do as you want me to be. I will behave as you wish because I have no power, and I am tired of being punished for telling my truth. I watched how my mother behaved. When I was 15, my head spun with her certainties for my future, dances, society, and marriage. I wanted nothing to do with the Machiavellian plotting, the secrecy, and what I considered the underhandness of how she maneuvered in her life with Doubleday and Company and my brother Nelson. But particularly when it spilled into mine, which meant that I had to listen to it every evening. Why the conniving secrecy about who knows what you are planning or thinking? If you don't want anyone to know, tell no one. This seems academic to me. And ask directly for what you want, I said to my mother. She replied, that course would alienate men and bring failure in the business or any personal relationship. Oh, you poor boys, spoiled from birth on, I thought. But it took me until I was well into my 30s to realize I didn't have to continue that course, by which time I had a son of my own. Fiery anger began in my belly against egotistical, spoiled males, and in particular against my arrogant brother and my mother, who had carefully, lovingly created him as a bully. Society balls in New York now captured my mother's attention. All four of them. They called the Mets, the Gets, and the Halls and the Calls. She wanted me to come out in society, which was, in fact, the meat market. This was her way of planning for my future, as she planned for Nelson's by politicking for him to take over the firm one day. Debutantes were dressed up in tulle with bare shoulders, perfume, a ready smile, a possible tasty morsel for marriage. I did it and found out I was no longer scared to dance with boys. I'd been molested when I was 9, and I was so terrified of boys I couldn't get near them. And it has affected me almost all my life. Would-be partners were not going to molest or hurt me. This was a significant change, a relief. With gardenias in my hair and silver slippers on my toes, I danced and danced and danced. I was popular, fortunately, and spent 4 years happily swirling in a dream world of rhythms, smiling at each boy, whether I liked him or not. He may have had bad breath and been stupid, but I still smiled. For half an hour, maybe more, I would sit out and talk with the boys who really interested me. Most boys were ordinary, perfectly nice but boring. I was interested in the bruised and the lame, where life had already intervened. I could make a difference in their lives, even for a brief moment. John Sargent was a young man who worked in Doubleday and Company. He was from the Sargent family in Boston, related to John Singer Sargent. He was tall, handsome, godlike actually. And he came down and spent a good deal of time with my mother, talking to her about publishing, and late into the evening, wheeling and dealing with her, trying to figure out how she could get more power in the company. I met John Sargent again in our driveway the day before my father died. My father was in a coma by then. It was Monday, January 10th, 1949. In the years following the funeral, my mother asked John to fill in as her extra man for business lunches and dinners, and on social evenings, John was a junior editor now, no longer in advertising, which pleased him. He was very well read, amusing, and comically witty. His manners were impeccable when he wasn't drunk, and he knew to send flowers if his behavior had failed or faltered. My mother enjoyed talking business with him long into the night, plotting ways for her to gain power in the workings of Doubleday and Company. Her goal was specific and focused: to ensure the presidency of the firm for Nelson. In the meantime, she did her best to undermine her business enemies: the president of Doubleday, Doug Black, and Aunt Dorothy Babcock, my father's sister, who had demanded a dividend even while my father was alive, so her stock in the company would produce some income. Not a bad idea. My father believed in pouring profits back into the company, but that was all very well for him because John Singstack, board member and tax expert, had set a policy that the company would pay my father's considerable expenses, all of them, instead of a salary. Aunt Dorothy had no such arrangement, of course. Over cocktails before dinner or brandy after, my mother responded with avid interest and delight to scraps of publishing gossip from John. Book publishing thrived on gossip, as much back then as it does today. Now, when I was going to these dances, I got a call from John Sargent, and he said, "Do you have a ticket for tonight? I want to go to the dance." And I said, no, I didn't. But I wondered why he was calling me, and it kind of enlivened me. And I thought, does he want to see me? I've been with him on weekends. We've taken walks. I have never even gone to the movies with him. What's all this about? Well, eventually, I found him a ticket, and we met outside the dance. John was at the Pierre Ballroom entrance when I arrived. Very little was said. We danced around the highly polished floor to Lester Lannon's music. He in a tuxedo, me in a low-cut, virtually strapless evening dress, the bodice ornamented with crystal drops and sequins, the swinging bouffant skirt of dusty pink tulle. Who are all these boys that keep cutting in? Are they all your boyfriends? John inquired. His sharp-edged tone was close to threatening. I figured he was huffy because I was popular, cut in on regularly. John was not used to seeing me at dances. He saw me at home, at events that were connected to business, with one boyfriend, maybe over a year's time. We danced and danced. In between, he vanished. I never saw him again. Not standing on the sidelines, not at the bar. Where is he? But there was an old boyfriend that I talked to, and we sat and went over what the last year of our life had been. We'd broken up a year before, and that was nice to have friends again. John found me, invited me to dance. I got up, hugged my ex-love, and smiled up at John as he took my hand. It was close to midnight. The band was playing a Strauss waltz. We stepped on the dance floor, waited a second facing each other in dance position, then began the liquid motions of the Vienna waltz. He bent his head down close to me, to my ear. Marry me? A question? A statement? I was not sure which. My throat tightened. I said, oh, yes. John held me close while we twirled and twirled. I was used to boys saying, odd things at night, and not remembering them in the morning. Alcohol was usually the reason, but sometimes it was just stud bravura. John had been drinking, I could tell by how he had held himself rigidly correct and how the pupils of his eyes floated upward. But I had felt a wildness running through me when I was near him or even thought about him. I could think of nothing else. In the cab on the way home, we could not get enough of each other. The following night at dinner at the 21 Club, John gave me a gold charm for my bracelet, a small book with 3 pages. The first had the previous day's date engraved on it, the date of our engagement. I was so surprised at his thoughtfulness that I could only mumble trivialities. I'm so touched, John, thank you. I can wear it always. And I kissed him quickly on the cheek, not a passionate kiss like in the cab. The following page is for the date of our wedding, John said as he sipped his martini, recovering from my public display of intimacy, and the opposite page for the births of our children. That was it. the words, births of our children. Those words zinged into me piercing. This moment would decide my future, yes or no. My God, what have I done? Pretty crazy, huh? I did marry him. I met John King's through a friend in publishing. He was a friend of Ken Wilson at Reader's Digest. And we basically were living together. He was staying at my apartment. And I'm going to read you a very short piece about Selma, because it was a moment for me when I made a decision to do something that was against the law, and it was against what everybody said. But I followed my heart, and I have never regretted it for one bloody moment. As I thought about the march, I recalled that some protesters had been jailed after the last one, so I hired a lawyer in Selma in case I was imprisoned there. While making these arrangements, I began to feel a new sense of power. I was acting on my beliefs. It was my right to do so. My psychiatrist, the President of the United States, my brother, and my husband all said, no, don't go. There was a hotline with instructions on how to get to Birmingham, Alabama, where to stay, and where to meet for the march. We listed our names with the march organization, and I got plane tickets. The hotline itself gave limited information. I wondered about the distance from Birmingham to Selma via back roads. How long would it take? What was the temperature and weather forecast for the area? There was no internet at the time. In Selma, we congregated in an open field next to a white church. I was not a believer in any religion and worried that there would be a long sermon in the church where I would be uncomfortable with the religious rhetoric. We waited for instructions. Many white people milled about the crowds of mostly black, very young boys. There was not much interaction between the two races. Eventually, we were lined up 8 abreast, 2 whites at each end, and blacks in the middle. The young black boy who took my hand couldn't have been over 14. Martin Luther King came out of the church with his entourage of about 10 men, maybe 15, and walked down the wooden steps onto the field. He stood before us, a man of peace with a mission. I was filled with admiration for him, and to this day can feel the power of his presence. We began the march with men, women, a few girls, and lots of black boys under the age of 18. Slowly, the wide belt of humans began to move, to march quietly as instructed, with peace in our hearts. After a few blocks, we turned left to face the bridge. Phalanxes of police, riot squads lined each side of the road on both sides of the bridge. Dignitaries like Governor Wallace, Jim Clark, and Bull Connor faced us across the river. King began walking across the bridge. They met halfway. We had no idea what was going to happen. I was scared. We waited. The dignitaries turned back across the river, and King returned to the head of our line. We began to move, still uncertain, until we saw Governor Wallace, James Clark, and Bull Connor step aside, allowing us to pass. Why don't I just do something really, I'll give you one paragraph. I was introduced to the work of Joan Mitchell. Her powerful abstract paintings, brilliant in color, were explosive with passion. The landscapes surrounding her home outside Paris often were their inspiration, and her works were fueled by rage. They taught me that anger could be translated. I researched her earlier work, traced how she had dropped representational work, opening her unconscious mind for the deeper truth of abstract expressionism. I learned from her work, her paintings, her pastels, and from de Kooning and Franz Klein, as well as Milton Resnick and Richard Diebenborn and others. All these abstract expressionists talked to me. I came upon the writings of Anais Nin, the journals that recorded her way of life, the freedom to explore the sensual and sexual parts of our being, the creative and artistic, so different from the way I had been raised, uptight, Victorian, Edwardian, never sexual. Anais Nin was a revelation, someone who felt the sensual as I did. Her writings set me free. And here I am. Lo and behold! I would be happy to entertain questions about anything or everything. Who's got bravery in their heart? Hello, yes.
You read a little bit about your experience in Selma.
Yes.
And given your things that are happening now, I'd love to hear more about how you feel
Today?
sure today.
Loud and clear. I was asked to say how I felt today after my being in Selma. I'm depressed. I'm sad. And I accept the fact that there is probably not the time when this country can face having a woman as a president. I think it's just too much for a majority of the men to take. Does it make me angry? A little. I don't think Donald Trump is probably the best candidate I've seen ever. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Am I angry? Yeah. Of course. And I see a lot of young women out here, and I'm delighted. And I would say to you, follow your passion, whatever it is, and if it doesn't work out one way, try another. Pick yourself up. If you're kicked down, pick yourself up, cry, find a friend, and move on. I was never told that life was a journey. I was told you go to school and you get married and you have children and you die. And that's not true. There's lots that can be done. And there is no reason that a woman's mind is not as good as a male mind. Or better. Thank you, sir. Well done, and I see you still have hair in your head, so good for you. Not much, but it's still there. So yeah, anybody else?
I guess I'm thinking about the artwork that I was privileged to help hang about a year and a half ago here in the galleries. I'm thinking about the stories that you shared here, and I'm wondering, today we live in a world where, if I think about the movies or paintings or artwork or writings, most of it's produced or promoted for men. And just to keep in the theme of what we've been talking about and around what's going inspired you in your life?
Thank you. That's a good question. I've read a lot of women, from Emily Dickinson up and wide. And I've read a lot of men work. And I think that both of them are necessary for understanding what the world, how the world works. There has been always a patriarchal system in this country and throughout most of the world. And I would call it, as in Wyoming, the good old boy society. And I once was up in Sheridan, and we were looking at what we were going to do in the year 2020. And what did we want for Sheridan? I was in charge of a table, and my table wanted to get rid of the good old boy society. So I stood up when I was called and said to get rid of the good old boy society. Now, there were 300 people in the room, and there was not one sound. So, isn't it when you get a question like that, my mind goes absolutely blank? I read a great deal of fiction now. When I was writing the book, I couldn't read at all. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus on a paragraph. I read contemporary fiction, non-historical, Gothic novels. I don't read those. Yeah, it's kind of not my style. I just finished reading a number of Alison Haigie's book, and I found them powerful, on to point, and really such a breath of fresh air. I'm not a big short story reader, but I found those as powerful as any novel or any essay. And they made me think. And if they can make me think, they can do anything to anybody else. What do you read? Come on, you have to come up here and speak up.
So right now I'm reading a book by a poet, that's hot mic, William Stafford. He was a conscientious objector and taught at a school that I went to very briefly. And he talks a lot about his process of writing in really early mornings. I guess it's not an autobiography, but it's written by his son. I don't know, I guess I've been trying to listen to more female voices in terms of music and read more female minds in terms of books. And I'm a filmmaker, so I've been thinking about how few and far between female directors are, at least in terms of how noted they are. It's just something I've got in the brain, and I thought you might be somebody good to ask about it.
I think if you read for something that interests you even a little bit, and you put your passion with it, and make it part of your life, and make it part that if you read like half an hour every night, and would you please repeat it to me so that I would do it? Because there's a terrible thing called an iPad.
You started calling tree.
Okay. Well, good for you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Anybody else?
Hi, Neltje.
Hi.
Greg Dickerson from Bighorn. It's been a while. Good to see you again. I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of stories of people from the East, from society, culture out east, and they've come to the West and kind of found this place to escape or regenerate. And I wanted to know from you, what's the appeal of Wyoming or the West for you as a woman and an artist, and what do you think draws people out to this place?
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful question. I saw, when I was a kid, I was taken by the maid to the Lyric Theater in Oyster Bay on Saturday afternoon, and we saw 2 Westerns and did bingo in between. So, I saw the old Gary Cooper, and you name it, the old-time cowboys. And the air that was projected was so pure. The words that they said were so on point to what they really wanted to get done. My life was so surrounded by these kind of Machiavellian things of, if you would go here and please do this, and then maybe this would happen, then I could get this done, instead of just saying, would you please go get me a cup of coffee? So I found that attractive, and I think that's what started. I also believe that in another lifetime, I lived in the area that I'm living in now. I feel so committed to that land and so blessed by being there. It is so familiar. And what it has given me is a freedom. I can fail at a painting. I can fail at a love affair. But I became an alcoholic, like my family before me. I had to stop drinking. I looked up at those mountains and said to myself, if those mountains can remain, and the tree, cottonwood outside my bedroom window can stand up to the storms, I can do this. And I did it day by day. That's the kind of courage that landscape has given me. It also has given me such delight, such just wondrous delight. And as a woman in Wyoming, when I had the Sheridan Inn, and I learned to cook for 500 people, and I was out in front being polite and nice to everybody. I was a divorcee. That's bad. And so the tables were round, and there were 8 at every table, and in the banquet rooms, and I would be a party to it, and I would sit down, and people would get up and move away. But I survived. And I think what I've learned to be is strong, kind, quite generous, and pissed off if you hurt my dogs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to have a question?
Actually, hi, Neltje, Mark Jenkins.
Hi.
You actually answered much of my question, but I would like to give you perspective on the future of the landscape in Wyoming, given that you've been so intimate with it.
Well, there are more little ranchettes all the way out from Sheridan. There are more Burger Kings and places like that. There were 28 bars and about 3 restaurants when I got to town. And there are now probably 11 bars and 32 restaurants. Things have switched. The culture in the Sheridan area has expanded. The college is very good. It has good things going on and that invite the local community to be part of. There's a museum there that is fine. There are music, there are plays. But I hang out on the eastern side, and I kind of hang out by myself with my dogs. And My days of being a public figure in town have vanished. I used to know everybody on the airplane when I got up on. I don't anymore, but I still say hi to everybody as I walk down the street, and I still do that when I go to New York. And they look at me very peculiarly. It's not what you should be doing. I hope with the Nature Conservancy and the work that they do and some of the other institutions that try and protect the land and put easements on it so that there is limited development, I do hope that those mountains that I look on every day will remain without 300 light bulbs per square foot. Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be a bitch. Thank you very much. I had to check out whether I did okay with him. Come with me, we'll go out, I'll sign books if you would like a book signed. If you don't, I'll talk to you happily. As you can see, I'm rather gregarious. Hi.
Hi, I'm Brad Howard.
Tell me your name.
Bradford Howard.
Bradford Howard,
Yes,
hi.
ma'am. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I don't understand your first name.
Neltje. I only have one name.
Oh,
Yes, I'm very curious.
right.
Drop my name, my Doubleday name, and I've always signed my work Neltje.
You made it up, or?
No, it was my first name always. It means little Cornelia in Dutch.
Oh.
And my grandmother was Dutch.
Thank you.
My wife.
Thank you.
Hi.
Louise, she's from Georgia.
Hi, Louise. This lady is my yarn lady.
That was lovely.
Hey, you.
Hello, Nelson.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Nice to say hello.
I am so glad you came.
Well, we wouldn't listen. I brought my wife, Jenny.
You at Peck Tobin's birthday party.
But not too hard. Okay.
Hi.
And she's going to be up at Gentel later because she's.
You are. Great.
I am.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. This is a great reading. Thank you.
Okay.
How are you holding up with all this?
I'm doing not bad for my age. You know. Saying hello, Pete.
Hi, that was wonderful.
I understand you had a piece of his art hanging in.
I did forever.
Where was it in?
Greenwich
Greenwich Village,
Right. Yeah. And then it went to my loft on 17th Street in Chelsea.
You know, our lives parallel so well, but I'm from the poor and
Really?
you're from the rich, and the experiences.
Yeah?
It just amazes me. And
It's amazing that past life, isn't it? Hello.
Hi, I enjoyed your readings. I can't wait to read your book.
Good.
And I'm waiting for it to get signed. I didn't know if you were
I'm
stumbling
going to
in
have
somewhere.
signing in here.
I bought it as a gift from my book club and
Oh,
have an
wonderful.
exchange, and I think this would be perfect.
That's terrific.
Yes, I think it would be a very, very good read.
That's terrific. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope your book club enjoys it, and you get different, they can ask different questions, and you can answer them all.
That's right.